Hey, America. I've been trying to find some time to tell you this story. There hasn't really been a good moment. Either the dogs are going in and out of this room and causing a ruckus, or the kids upstairs, or I'm tired, or whatever it is. But I figured I'm just going to have to deal with all that kind of stuff if it pops up. Because I felt like this was an important story to tell, and it's an important time to tell it. So this starts around 1985. I was 12, and we were on a camping trip with our church. Um, it's kind of a new church to us. My parents, my parents were starting to sense that I was turning into a teenager, even though I wasn't really there yet, and they thought church and might, straighten me out, getting me back online with being the obedient little kid that they had previously remembered me being. And it really sort of had the opposite effect. Um, you see, when you're a chubby band kid, you don't have a lot of game with girls. But church youth group, well, the girls there have to be nice to you because Jesus, right? So I went from really having no reason to rebel beyond just the sport of doing it to all of a sudden this whole new social life opened up for me. And there are all these new people in my life, and girls especially. And so here I am at this church camp out, and all these kids that are around my age, and hormones exploding and all that kind of stuff, as you can imagine, 12, 13, 14 years old. Anyways, there was this girl that apparently liked me. Her name was Karen. Unfortunate name in these modern times. She was not a Karen, but her name was Karen. Anyways, um this was the 80s, and hair was big then, if anybody remembers. And camping is not the best environment to maintain good hair. And so this girl, Karen, wanted to talk with me, or maybe just to find out if I liked her or whatever. But she was embarrassed to come up and talk to me herself because her hair was flat. And in the 80s, flat hair was just a non starter. So she asked another girl named Rochelle to come talk to me on her behalf. And so this other girl, who was far more bold and gave no craps, was more than happy to come up and talk with me and get, basic information on me or whatever, so she could relay it back to her friend. What she didn't realize at the time is that I was going to end up being far more interested in her for being, direct and forward and brave than I was for the girl with the flat hair, which, by the way, I didn't care one way or the other about the hair issue, but the girl that was hiding behind the tree, too embarrassed to come and talk to me in person. And that girl eventually became my wife. We got married when I was just barely 19 and she was still 18. She actually moved out with me before we got married, despite her parents' extreme disapproval. In fact, she lived, they had a garage, it was a 3-car garage. But the third garage had been converted to a room, and the only way to it was through the garage. And that was her room in the house. And she begged and begged her parents because she wanted black carpet. Teenagers, what are you gonna do? And her parents didn't want her to have black carpet because they thought it would just look dirty all the time. And she begged with them, "Oh no, I'll vacuum every day." And her dad paid the money and got black carpet in her bedroom for her. And like 2 weeks later, she moved out, and then moved into the apartment that I had just gotten in town, and left him with this stupid room with black carpet that was just off of a garage and had no hope of ever being clean. So let's just say our relationship together started under curious circumstances. And it took a while for the family to sort of recognize that we weren't kidding around, that we were really going to get married. And then eventually, several months later, once the planning and stuff got coordinated, we did. We got married in a nursery, a plant nursery that sells plants and stuff, outside of a Mexican restaurant, on a ridiculously windy day. And her veil got caught in the rose bush plants. They were still for sale, by the way. Like, you literally could have bought the wedding decorations. But her hair, the veil caught up in the wind and wrapped into the rose trees that they had lining the aisle. And I had the rings delivered by a Domino's pizza guy, which annoyed everybody. And we got picked up in a dumper limo where the privacy glass stayed down, and the limo driver brought his girlfriend. So it was basically just the four of us driving around like a double date. After we left the wedding, there's a lot of stories. My grandma hired the exotic dancer for my bachelor party, which was only attended by 3 of my friends and pretty much just the restaurant staff of my grandparents' restaurant that I worked at, that happened to be on staff that day. It was a very curious time of life, and I could talk about that a lot. But the point of the story is that I was the firstborn, she was the firstborn, and where I thought I was willful and independent, I had nothing on this woman. She was the most fiercely independent and opinionated and strong woman I ever met in my life. And that was one of the things that appealed to me about her. She was impervious to everything. She was undefeatable. Anyways, so we got married in 1992, and the years went by, 29 of them, in fact. And we sold everything we owned in California. We loaded up a minivan and a U-Haul trailer, and we moved to New Hampshire just so we could start a life that was our own and not under the shadow of our family. And we got there to New England with $60. She had one friend from high school who had said, "Oh, you should come visit us sometime." And then we just showed up with a U-Haul. And we started from scratch again in New Hampshire. From there, we found jobs, and I found benefits administration, where I still am today. And we got foster license, and we adopted 5 kids from foster care. Those are the kids and the grandkid probably upstairs you can hear squawking every now and then right now. And we had an amazing life. We did amazing things. We moved from New Hampshire after many years there to New Mexico and had more adventures. We moved from New Mexico to Texas, and had many adventures again. And I never met a challenge she couldn't overcome. She climbed Mount Shasta with a group of boys when she was a teenager because they didn't think she could. So she was the ultimate hold my beer person. Like, if she got a whiff that she felt like anybody thought she couldn't accomplish something, she would do it 5 times over just to prove that she could. I never saw her lose. It was infuriating sometimes to be married to her. In fact, I've often said being married to Rochelle was like being married to General Patton. There was always a war. There was always a noble cause to fight for. And especially once we became foster parents, and then we were homeschool parents on top of it, there was just always something noble to fight for. Even when our kids got older, she and they needed her less on the day-to-day. And the homeschool stuff was all online. She got a job at Devereaux Behavioral Health Services, which is a residential program for kids. Sorry about the dogs. For kids that are in trouble, and they can't be at home. The public schools don't know what to do with them, but they probably shouldn't go to jail either. And so, through a variety of funding mechanisms, these kids will end up in this residential program, and they're broken kids. They've had a whole every possible thing you could imagine horrific being done to a kid was done to these kids that ended them up in this situation. And she raised her hand and said, no, I'm going to take care of those kids. And she was amazing at it. She went from an entry level position to being one of the most trusted people in that organization within months. It was tremendous. She was an absolute warrior. And like I said, I never saw a challenge that she couldn't overcome. She had a tattoo on her leg, about mid-thigh. It was a water line. And that was the water line. That was where the water was when she evacuated those kids from Dev on the back of a dump truck out of the Harvey floodwaters on the night that it overtook their campus. I've never met a force of nature like this person, and I never expected to see her lose a fight ever. I never had. It just wasn't conceivable until the end of February this year, when she died of COVID. There's a lot of talk right now about vaccines and masks and liberties, and all of our political leaders have opinions about this stuff. I'm not going to debate whether vaccines work. I know they work. You know they work. Do you know how you know that they work? Because you don't have polio, and nobody you know has had polio. You've never had smallpox, and nobody you know has ever had smallpox. There's inherent risk in everything, even in vaccines. There's a risk in getting in a car and driving down the road. There's a risk in eating chicken, choking on the chicken bone. There's a risk in everything. Every day we wake up and we engage in a balance of risk and reward. Right? Everybody does all the time. We could go at any moment. There's no guarantees in life. But there are things that we can do that are rational gambles, or the reward is reasonably higher than the risk. And I know that there's a lot of arguments right now. And I know that the concept of mask mandates seems like it's violating liberties. And I know that employers or potentially other places of business requiring vaccinations feels like an intrusion on liberty. And the fights for liberty are worth fighting. They really are. And I'm not arguing anybody's freedom to fight for what they feel is liberty and freedom, right? This is the things that our country is founded upon. I'm just talking right now, not about politics. I'm talking from my experience to you, whoever it is that's watching this, whoever's listening to this. I'm just talking with you about personal experience and this whole risk reward thing. Because you see, one day, late February, I had to decide when the strongest woman I ever met in my life would die. The machines were keeping her going, and they would continue to do so. They could have put a trach in her throat and moved her off to some other warehouse situation and just kept her going. Medical technology is cruelly amazing sometimes in their ability to sustain the human body. It's hard to even say to sustain life, but to keep the body alive. And that day in late February, The decision fell to me, and everybody looked to me to decide. Is today the day? Is today the day that Rochelle Charles ceases to exist on this earth? So we made that choice. And we went to the hospital. Now, bear in mind, it had been a month. When she got sick enough that she needed to go to the hospital, she called me. And I knew she was sick with COVID. And so I sat in the front and she sat in the back, and we rolled the windows down and kept the air on full blast to kind of keep the air circulating to the rear. I wore a mask, she wore a mask, but we were trying to be obviously as careful as we could. The last time I saw her, she was getting out of the back of my truck in her pajamas, walking into the doors of the emergency room. I don't remember when the last time I hugged her. I don't remember the last time I touched her. That was the last time I ever saw her walking under her own strength, or even moving under her own strength. The next time I saw her was a month later in the ICU, surrounded by dozens of other COVID patients, all in their own individual battles. We walked down a really long hallway and turned a corner, and there was a room, maybe 20 by 20, with a giant glass front to it, a huge fish tank. And there she was in the middle of the room. They had her propped up, the breathing tubes taped to her mouth. Her eyes were closed. Everything was swollen. And I stood there with my 5 kids. And we all said goodbye. And I told the kids that they could stay as long as they wanted, or they could go back down and wait if they wanted to. And each of them, one at a time, chose to make their way back downstairs by themselves. And eventually it was me and my oldest. And we nodded to the nurse, and they went in and they turned off the machines and they pulled the hose from out of her mouth. And her chest lurched about 3 times. And like a muscle reaction, her body trying to breathe 3 times. And then she was still. She died within a minute. This woman that I had never seen beaten by anything, who climbed mountains, who rescued children from disaster, literally, was taken down by this. That day, every moment of it, the smell of the room, the look on her face, every moment of it is burned into my brain. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't try to think of a way I could have saved her, something I should have done, something any of us could have done differently. It's pointless. It's pointless. But I'm a fixer. It's what I do. How do I bring her back? Even now, I held her ashes in my hand and scattered her to the wind on the coast of California. And even to this day, there is some tiny part of my brain that is trying to figure out how to bring her back. There's one thing I want you to know about that entire experience. When I was talking with the nurses deciding the day she would die, when we were there and I was standing with my kids, looking at her living body for the last time, and in all the days since, picking her ashes up at the funeral home, taking her to California to spread her at the ocean, every day since, not once did I think about politics. Not once did I think about liberties being taken away because somebody has to wear a mask. Not once did I think of my freedoms being stripped away because I might have to get a vaccine. She died a month before the vaccine was available, almost to the day. A month. Listen to me. I pray that whoever's watching this has never had to deal with this. And I pray that you never do. I pray that you and your loved ones stay safe and that these things never come to pass in your life. But if you are not getting a vaccine because you think it is some violation of your civil liberties, I can promise you, on the day when one of your loved ones is behind that glass and you have to decide the day they die, on the day that the doctor comes to you laying in a hospital bed and says, we have to intubate you, and you know that means you might not come back. You likely won't. You have to go to sleep knowing you might never come back. You will not be thinking, well, at least I defended my civil liberties. Yes, we may die, but at least I took the high ground on my politics. That will not be on your mind. What will be on your mind is the same thing that I think was on mine. What could I have done? Show me any path. Show me anything. I will do anything to back up from this road that we find ourselves on. That's the message I want to bring to you today. It's not a clever political question or anything like that. This is a plea from my destroyed heart to yours. If there is something you can do to protect yourself and to protect your family from the loss that has been experienced by my family, I don't think politics are more important than that. And I don't think you do either. I'm not telling you what you should do. What I'm trying to tell you is when it's too late, whatever reasons you have today won't matter. So that's it. That's the thing I needed to share with you guys. I hope it finds you well. Hope your family as well. And I hope you never have to face the things that we've had to face.